problem with homelessness is it's like there's two paths: $100 for a tent from Big Five,
Right.
or $800,000 for a supportive housing unit that's has all these bells and whistles on it. But like, where's in the middle?
Right.
That's tiny homes. That's maybe a sanctioned site where people can camp. Like when you go camping, we go camping. You go to a campsite, you're in space number 17. Like, tell people you can, I know you
can exist here.
You can exist, but you can't exist there on the river. So it should be the same thing. I understand that you don't have a place to go and you want to be out here camping, but let's have you go somewhere that makes sense.
Right.
So we're going to be opening a number of those areas.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of SACTOWN Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by my Assemblymember Kevin McCarty. Kevin, how's it going? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Well, I love SACTOWN Talks, and I love the fact that I am SACTOWN. This is my district, of course, and this is my hometown. I grew up here, so I'm all about Sacramento.
No, definitely. And it's kind of like, it's pretty cool. Like your new district, like incorporates, where you live and kind of where we all work, and also where you grew up now, right? So
Yeah.
Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your district and kind of how it's changed in the last, I guess, year or since you've been on the show, since redistricting?
Yeah, so it's kind of mixed feelings about that. So when I ran for office, 18 years ago, I ran in Tahoe Park, where we lived. Now we live, a neighborhood over in Elmhurst. So Tahoe Park in the southern part of my district, which elected me in politics,
Right.
2 decades ago, they're no longer going to be part of my district. We talked about that a little bit later, the campaign work I'm doing over there for the next person for that seat. So I lost all of that, but I gained the area where I grew up.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. Like when I campaigning a few months ago during the primary, I literally knocked on the doors of the homes that I lived in when I was in middle school and then when I was in high school. And, some of the neighbors were still
Right.
there. I hadn't seen them for a couple of decades. And one of the women's there, and she remembered me. She said, "Oh, I remember you had a loud party." And I said, yes, that was me, but I'm very different now. I'm responsible. I'm your assembly member. And she was just giving me a hard time. But she knew the work that I was doing, and she said she was appreciative that I'm going to be her representative. So yeah, the area where I went to middle school and elementary school and high school, Cameron Ranch, Winston Churchill, El Camino, American River College, my community college, they're all now in my new district, which is the 6th district.
It's kind of cool. I was talking to Mia Bonta recently, and she was telling me that you and Rob Bonta actually went to school together at one point. Is that right? Yeah,
that middle school, Winston Churchill. Rob Bonta was a year ahead of me, and I knew him. He was a very bright student. He was in the honors program. I was just in the basic program there because it was my neighborhood school. But the funny thing is we both ended up assembly members, 30 years later.
That was her thing. Like we were talking about kids and like how, kids do different things. And she said, you had this great quote, like, "Hey, Rob and I went to the same school. He went to Yale and all these prestigious schools. I went, community college, Sac State, and here we are at the same spot." I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, I go and talk to kids about that too, because even besides community college, I was not a stellar high school student. I just wasn't into school for whatever reason. I was into sports and just getting by. I just didn't apply myself. I always knew that I could if I ever had to. And I didn't graduate from high school. So the other school in the area that I now represent is called Winterstein Adult School. So I went to adult school, and Rob was literally at Yale. And who would have thought at that point in time in 1991 that, a couple decades later, we'd both be next to each other in the state assembly working on policy for 40 million Californians. But, that's how it works. But also I think it's a good reminder to people that I talk to in my district that, keep at it. It's not where you start or in the middle of the way. It's where you finish.
So I've never heard this story. Like whatever got you to run for city council in the first place and, decide to get into politics? Like what were you doing before you decided to get into politics? Yeah,
we'll go back to that. So in the early 90s, I literally flunked out of high school and had to roll in an adult school to get my high school equivalent. And then I enrolled in community college. And then like a year later, there was a big election for president. It was 1992. And Bill Clinton was the candidate. And he was, kind of like my age, but even younger. Like now I'm 50. I think he was 45 when he was running. And I was just enthralled with Bill Clinton and what he had to offer and kind of a new generation. And I decided that I wanted to be a campaign volunteer. I had no idea how to do that. So I started doing that. I decided I wanted to major in politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that in community college. I transferred to CSU, Long Beach State. And I came back here during the summer one year when I was at Long Beach, and I did an internship at the Capitol right across the street here. And I said, man, this is fascinating.
Who'd you work for?
A woman named Denise Ducheney.
Okay, yeah.
She had just won a special election, and she had a young chief of staff named Maria Alvarez, who is now my chief of staff, ironically, 28 years later. And she's like, hey, we need help. Someone answer the phone. Someone can just open the mail. And I said, sure, I'll come and do that.
Right.
But I just fell in love with politics, the topics, education, healthcare, water, crime, reproductive issues, ironically the same issues that we're always talking about today.
Right.
And I decided, this could be an exciting career for me. I love the opportunity to make a difference in my community. I felt after my life turned around, I wanted to dedicate myself to public service. So that just became a quest for me. So to answer your question is that, after a couple years in the Capitol, I was looking around one day on the assembly floor. I think I was 23, 24. And I thought to myself, by definition, there must be one person from all these seats. There has to be a person from a community to represent all these districts. Right. And I said, why can't it be me? And so that became kind of my quest. And obviously it took me, a decade or so after that to make it all happen. But at that point in time, I thought, I think I would enjoy public service and trying to get elected and make a difference in California, my community. And that's how it all began.
And so you ran for Sacramento City Council first, right? And what year was that?
Yeah, I ran for city council in 2004. So I think when the campaign started, I was 31. I was very young. And, I still think I look kind of young, I'm 50, but back then I looked super young. And so it was challenging at the door. People were asking me, how old am I? Am I ready for this? And so those same neighborhoods I just talked about, Tahoe Park, right? I hustled for a year knocking on doors. And
a year before the election.
Yeah,
wow.
I was insane. I walked 12,000 doors like almost twice. I did it for like 11 and a half months walking precincts.
Right. And who are you running against?
He was another guy. He was a young guy like me too. His name's John Boyd. I still see him around town. He's doing very well. He's one of the executives at Sutter Health for their mental health programs. He's quite successful. But at that time we were going at it, trying to win this city council seat. And I succeeded. I think it was like 60-40. So, that was 2004. It's launched my career in the city council.
And then how long were you on the council for?
I was on the council for 10 years.
10 years. So to 2014.
To 2014.
So then you come into the assembly. In 2014, you replaced Dr. Pan, was it?
I replaced Roger Dickinson.
Roger
Dickinson. And he left a couple years early because he was trying to run for the Senate against Dr. Pan.
Okay.
That's where you get the reference.
Okay. Interesting. So how has campaigning changed? From when you first started, just going door to door to today, where I guess you have more name ID, but I guess you have social media and you got all this stuff that you didn't have when you first.
Yeah, that's a great question because I thought about this last night.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing a lot of campaigning this fall, a little bit for me, but I have two high priority races. One, my spouse Leticia, she's on the school board running for re-election in East Sac area, Elmhurst, Tahoe Park, kind of where we live. And then my former assembly district, because of redistricting, like I said earlier, was kind of chopped up. So there's a candidate I'm supporting to replace me named Stephanie Wynn. So I've been out there 4, 5, 6 days a week, knocking on doors, several hours a day. So I've been out there a lot. So we can talk about what's hot on the voters' minds. But the one thing I will say that's changed dramatically in the last decade or so, since I ran that first time 18 years ago, technology, the whole Ring camera. The door opening is diminished. Because people see who's there.
Right.
Granted, in some of the neighborhoods like, East Sac, where I'm walking, or Tahoe Park, there's people out and about, doing yard work and coming out, or their doors kind of propped open with a nice weather. So you can get But I will say that technology has changed. With the
So are
doors
people
open.
are they not answering the door when they see you?
Yeah, and I know they're there.
Yeah.
And I know they're there. But in the olden days too, they weren't there. But I think that more people are just not engaging because they see.
Right.
But the flip side is with me knocking out there, so many people know who I am.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask
And
you.
they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, Kevin, hey, how are you?
Right.
You know, McCarty's. I haven't seen you for a while." So that's nice that people recognize me and no one's really yelled at me.
So yeah, so you're like going door to door, election season. Like, what is top of mind on voters? What are they saying? Hey, Kevin, you got to fix this. Like, this is an issue.
Well, the first thing I say is, "Hey, I'm your assembly member. I'm here at election time, coming by saying hello." I say, but I'm not talking a lot about me today. I'm talking about these other candidates.
Right.
So in some of these neighborhoods, I'd be talking about Wynn for assembly and Garcia for school board because it's the same area. Or others, it's only one. Inevitably, they listen to me when I'm talking about folks I'm engaging with for the election. But when they talk, it's always the same topic. And I would say, 1 in 5 voters, I think, hey, I have McCarty at my door. I'm going to talk to him about what I want to talk about. And so it's homelessness. The issues in the communities, the impact with homelessness, mental health, crime. I just had it last night. Some guy said that, his families just had too much of an impact over there in kind of the East Sac area by Alhambra, that it's really impacting their quality of life. And so I feel that. Yeah,
no, it's interesting. It's interesting political time here in Sacramento where you have 2 seats opening up, 2 pretty close races with Stephanie Wynn, in the South area. And then you got Dave Jones and Angelique Ashby on the Senate side. Can you kind of talk about those races and kind of which candidates you like and how you think they're going to prevail here in a couple weeks?
Yeah, well, I think they're both tight races. All 4 of the candidates for those races are actively campaigning and have, big campaign operations. So it's not like it's a one-sided one way or the other. I'm supporting for the assembly race to replace, I guess it's kind of replace me in those areas, but really technically it's Cooper's district.
Right.
About a third of it's my physical area. So I'm supporting Stephanie Wynn to replace me. And then I'm supporting Dave Jones in the Senate. And I'll one at a time. So Stephanie Wynn, I had nominated her as my Woman of the Year like 6 years ago because I saw her firsthand making a difference here in Sacramento, running a nonprofit, helping immigrants learn English, get job skills, become citizens, just kind of a doer in the community. She's been a council member in the region, focusing on the issues of the day that we tackle at the Capitol. So I've always been a big fan and supporter of hers, so endorsed her early. And then with Jones, I replaced him on that city council in 2014. So I've always been an ally of his and appreciated his politics. And so those are both easy choices for me. And, I think that those 2 candidates are both in a position to be successful, but it's a fierce competition in both races.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I haven't noticed a lot of like independent expenditures coming in on Sacramento races, but this year it seems to be, especially on the Senate side, pretty fierce on both ends.
Yeah, I guess when Dr. Pan ran against Dickinson, that was a multi-million-dollar race. Yeah. But that was 8 years ago.
Right.
So, it's almost a decade ago. People don't always remember. But that same type of intensity we're seeing on this race. And it's almost the same players who are taking the sides. And then in the assembly race, there's, a couple $1 million being spent on independent expenditures on both sides as well.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
a lot of money going down here.
Yeah, a lot of mail. And so that's the thing is when I'm for, Leticia, my wife on the school board, I'm talking about her and some voters say, oh yeah, I've seen a flyer, this and that. But it's hard when the Senate race has 40 mailers basically in the last couple of weeks and you have one, you get buried in there. So voters are, I think, overwhelmed by all this stuff coming at the door. And, but the flip side, if you don't keep sending that stuff, then how are you going to get your message out?
That's what I was wondering because I talked to you about this, last primary, right, where we were seeing all these like lawn signs everywhere for some candidates, and you're like, wow, this candidate might have a lot of support. Like this is interesting, and then the mail started coming. And then you're getting mail every day for this candidate, and you're like, "What? How is mail effective? Like, who checks their mail anymore? They just throw it away." But it's the act of like you actually look at it and then throw it away, and it just like subconsciously like resonates with you somehow.
I think so. I think you can't have a book. You can't have too much because maybe 1 in 10 will read the book, but I would say, 9 in 10 just casually, either just for a split second, and you just make an impression,
Right.
and they throw it away before it even gets to the house.
Yeah.
They throw it away like from the mailbox right there. So you need to be able to make your point pretty quick. It's a lot of work for those mail carriers lugging those papers around. I feel for them this time of year, and a lot of trees being utilized for this as well.
Right. It's a real interesting time in Sacramento. Since last time on your show, we've had COVID. Downtown has had a real kind of tough go of it, with a lot of state workers not coming back downtown to work every day. We're seeing a lot of the restaurants, struggling or shutting down altogether. Kind of what's kind of the state of downtown, and what's going to help bring us back here? What do you think?
Well, I'm very concerned. This is my district. This is my heart of my community. This is where I grew up too. Mm-hmm. And, since COVID and the basically, emptying out of downtown 2 years ago, it's had a dramatic negative impact. And now with, the nature of work being different, people are back to work, but people can now work remotely. And some of the employees across the nation, the world thought, I could do this. I can do, half time at home, half time in the office. So even that has a big difference on the traffic flows downtown. So, and then we're seeing just the rise in homelessness and people that, don't have a place to go. And so where do you see that? Right here. So, there's just as many homeless, sometimes people would say in New York City, but you don't see it as much because you see a bustling town with people walking and working and living there. And I think that's the big issue. If you look at COVID in Midtown versus downtown, same thing happened.
Right.
COVID's happening both places, but one place people live there. There's housing there. Right. People walking around. Here downtown, there's not a lot of people living here. So I think a couple things that are at work, which I'm working on, and some of the bills I'm working on, and we can talk more about that too now, is what can we do to get more housing down here in the core, more kind of eyes on the street, more activity. And then also, what happens in the future of work? Are people going to be permanently working from home? I think it's not going to be like it was. It's not going to be all at home, but maybe half and half. But even that is a significant decrease in foot traffic down here. So, one thing that I'm working on that we were successful, we got some money in the budget this year, and the governor signed one of my bills to look at adaptive reuse of some of the office buildings. Yeah. Like think of the Citizen Hotel. That used to be an office building.
It did.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you went there. Yeah. So the Citizen was an office building 15 years ago. It was converted to residential, albeit a hotel, not housing, but the same thing can be said. Are there other office buildings downtown which are underutilized state assets, which you can, turn into housing? Some may be scraping the building and going from scratch. Some may be, adaptive reuse, looking at the floor plans and seeing what you can do. So that's something that we desperately need to look at, and how we can repopulate downtown.
That's so interesting you said that, because that's exactly what I've noticed. It's like south of the Capitol towards Land Park, it's pretty normal, especially like our street is like such a blossoming street. Everybody wants to be there, and all the businesses seem to be doing well. And then Midtown, like east of the Capitol does great, but it's like west of the Capitol and north of the Capitol are struggling. And that's exactly right. There's nobody lives there, right?
Yeah, and you go back in history, we're trying to go back to the future, literally. I mean, 50 to 100 years ago, there was, 25,000 more people living down here in this core between the Capitol, the Tower Bridge, and kind of river to river.
Interesting.
But they tore it all out to build all these office complexes. And so we lost a lot of the people who live down here. So now we're trying to bring them back, learn from our mistakes. And, this is happening across the nation. It's not new. Los Angeles, other cities have done a really good job in the last couple of decades looking at underutilized real estate and saying, hey, we have a housing shortage, not always an office shortage. So how can we address these two things.
Right. You know, it's so interesting. Like our street is like been such a success, right? Like I remember that, when I was a kid, it was like Department of Corrections was there, nothing else, right? It was just kind of like an alley. And now it's like this like kind of cool, hip place. Lots of like tech companies are moving there. Like people want to be there. On the other hand, we have K Street, which is like much closer to the action here that I feel like we've struggled with for like 30 years. We always have a plan for K Street. It just doesn't seem to like work out. What have we learned?
We have the right outside. Your cars can drive down K. We did the arena down there.
Right.
We could do convention centers. So we're massive infusion. I was on the city council, like I said, for 10 years. So I voted on a lot of these things to try to make a difference here on K. And we've had mixed success. And I don't know if there is a silver bullet solution. I think over the years we thought, if we just do this, we're going to be done. If we just bring cars back on K. If we just do the arena, we're done. They're all pieces of the puzzle. But I think the biggest thing is people who are living here. Because think about it, we have tourism, like the conventions, and that's changed with COVID, and then people coming to work. So that is up and down. People living there are always there.
Right.
So some of these housing proposals for downtown housing, I think are really good because we have a housing shortage in the first place, but also can really help Sacramento.
Yeah, something interesting, like somebody told me, is like a lot of the buildings down here are like owned generationally, right? They've been in family, they've been owned for a really long time, and they have a really low property tax basis. So they have like not a big incentive to actually really do anything to the building. So kind of like what can be done to get these longtime property owners to do something with some of these buildings that aren't in the best shape to kind of help revitalize these areas?
Yeah, so somebody waiting it out for a decade is not good for us, not good for Sacramento. This is a high priority of the mayor, try to activate some of these buildings. So, what can we do? Sometimes as a city providing incentives and subsidies. They're one over here. They finally did that on 11th. And J, just construction right now, some like 5-story housing that's just almost done. Across the street, there's this building that's been, owned by one individual who for a decade or so, and they're just waiting it out. And so, we can't have that. So we need to see we can step in. So one thing that we're doing with the state too, in partnership with the city, is what can we do to put money on the table to like encourage people to do something. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, important. And that's this adaptive reuse for these state assets. But you're talking about private land, and there's only so much you can do. And part of me says, we've had this massive growth in the economy in the last decade in housing, prices. Right. And if we weren't able to make a go of it in the last 10 years here, and now we're slowing down with interest rates rising and construction industry slowing down, that makes me really concerned. If we weren't able to do it then, how are we going to be able to do it the next few years? So we really have our work cut out.
No, that's interesting. Well put. Homelessness is top of mind. Everyone talks about it. And it seems like anyone who's been downtown Sacramento, there's always been homeless people in downtown Sacramento. But it seems to kind of like have taken a turn these last few years. Like I remember like in 08, 07, we were on the news, like the tent city over by, the river on Loaves and Fishes. It'd be on national news and things like that. And it's just kind of like,
I think Oprah came out and did some show on that. Yeah.
And it was like, that's kind of always been there. Right. And it was just kind of like sensationalized, right? But we keep talking about the crisis. Like, how bad is homelessness today versus 10 years ago versus 20 years ago? Do we have an idea on the population? Is it significantly bigger, or are we just seeing it in a different way?
Well, I think you're seeing it more, and in large part downtown, because you don't see anything else. Mm. You don't see a lot of people, state workers, conventions. You don't see a lot, even with the Capitol changing. We're now moved to the other side. The Capitol now, so there's not as much action over here. So you're seeing it. And I know a lot of politicians, we want to make a difference, and we're saying, we've got X amount of people into housing who've been successful, and send out these press releases. But the voters, and I talk to them at the door, they're like, you're crazy. You can tell me all you want. I see it with my own 2 eyes. Right. I see it getting worse. I see it myself, Jared. I take my kids to school every day at Sutter Middle School and drive by these camps, and they're there. They're real. The city council just took an action a couple of days ago to focus on what happens near school sites. So it's a hot issue in our communities. And so, Sacramento, the homeless census, we missed one because of COVID, but so I think over a couple of years, our homeless population doubled. And so
Wow.
it is a reality. And, it's been a priority of mine to, not just move people from one place to the other,
Right.
but like open up sites. And I've fought to get a lot of money in the state budget for this. Ken Cooley and I this summer got a $25 million earmark in the budget to do housing along the American River Parkway. One of my top priorities here is the Parkway. Is, we have 2,000 people living along the river.
Right.
And, that's a public park. And like, we can't have that. It's a public asset
Right.
for all of us. And it's, not good for the public who want to utilize the park. And it's not good for them either, sleeping down on the river. So it's an issue front and center for all of us.
Yeah. You've mentioned the kind of stuff you got into the budget this year. Like we had this record surplus, was it almost $100 billion at the end of it? Kind of what things were you able to get in that budget for the community and kind of help us out solve some of these issues here?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So, my job as a legislator is to make a difference for my district and for California. Right. And so, I do that with a bunch of tools I have in my toolbox. So my toolbox may be introducing bills, writing laws, trying to get them passed, get to the governor. And I was successful this year, had, 15 or 20 bills that were signed by the governor. But I think probably the biggest success is stuff that I was able to do in the budget,
right.
Not just for local stuff for our community, but I do chair the education piece of the budget. So a lot of my top priorities that necessarily have a signing ceremony and a bill at the end of the day, because they were a bill that was incorporated in the budget down the road. And so that's some of my top accomplishments that I'm really proud of, but also a lot of follow-up work to make sure it's implemented. But to your specific question, what was I able to get here for our local community? We're about to announce the big funding package of what's getting, where it's all going in the next week or so. What I've been doing the last couple of years is I get a chunk of and I give it to the city, and the city and I work on priorities, whether they're public works projects, nonprofits, parks, library type stuff, community things. So we're working on the final list right now. But the other piece that we did succeed with that we're implementing now is this $25 million to focus on the Parkway, the American River Parkway, and to get to identify sites and open up sites to get homeless off the Parkway. And that is probably the most popular thing that I've done in my community when I talk to them, because the constituents that live up along the Parkway are very, very frustrated, and their patience is wearing thin.
Right. Where are some of the possible sites you guys are thinking about?
Well, there are different locations where we can have, people sometimes just camp. I think part of the problem with homelessness is it's like there's two paths: $100 for a tent from Big Five,
right,
or $800,000 for a supportive housing unit that's has all these bells and whistles on it. But like, where's in the middle?
Right.
That's tiny homes, right? That's maybe a sanctioned site where people can camp. Like when you go camping, we go camping. You go to a campsite, you're in space number 17. Like, tell people I know you can exist here. You can exist, but you can't exist there on the river. Like, I want to go camping in Tahoe on the beach, on Kings Beach, but like, I can't drive to today and put a tent in the middle of the beach. They tell me to go get a campsite.
Exactly.
So it should be the same thing. Like, I understand that you don't have a place to go and you want to be out here camping, but like, let's have you go somewhere that makes sense.
Right.
So we're going to be opening a number of those areas along, probably close to the river, not adjacent, to get people off. Not a permanent solution for those individuals. Hopefully they can eventually transition to something better along the way.
Right.
But it's very good triage, and we need that now.
No, definitely. It should be a big help to get some of the people off the streets and sidewalks where they're currently camping to exist somewhere.
Yeah, look, if and people always ask, what would you do if you were the king for the day, the mayor of Sacramento, or what have you? It's a tough job. I'm not sure there's any
strong
answers.
Mayor. If you were the strong mayor.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked Mayor Steinberg, he said this is a very difficult issue. You can't solve it. You can manage it, make it better. You can't just fix this whole thing.
Right.
You can just kind of make it better. And what I would do is I would have multiple sites where people can legally camp. And then you go and tell somebody who's camping in a place you shouldn't be, next to Sutter Middle School where my kids are, or along the river,
right,
or somewhere else. Be like, hey, you can't camp here anymore. You can go to one of these sites, these 3 camp sites, but you can't stay here anymore. And then eventually we're going to move your stuff because you need to go somewhere else.
right.
And I think we have to do that.
No,
we have to. Otherwise, we'll be drawn into this for years and years, and it'll only get worse and worse.
No, definitely well put. You know, you've mentioned that, you know, you're interested in education. That's one of the things you like working on. Your wife is on the school board, and you have 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
How has kind of been, you know, raising your own children, seeing how they learn and grow, and kind of your wife on the school board? How's that kind of shaped and kind of changed how you look at education policy?
Well, we're very fortunate. You know, our kids are doing well in school, and good grades, and you know, they had a good experience. And so, you know, we look what they have, but we realize that a lot of people and kids and families in California don't have what we have. And the first thing is that our kids got a massive head start when they were younger because they got to go to preschool, not for 1, not for 2, but 3 years. We got to go to preschool for 3 years. So when they started kindergarten, they were, you know, reading like, you know, at the 2nd and 3rd grade level in the kindergarten. So they got a huge bump. And so, you know, that's really reminded me of my big focus when I first was elected in 2014. My first bill I introduced was universal preschool in California. And so that was my top priority. And I'm excited that this fall it's launching. You know, I had to introduce that bill, I think 5 times before it was signed by the governor, included in the budget last year. And, you know, this fall we're going around seeing schools implement this free pre-K. It's called transitional kindergarten. But yeah, the experience of our family just solidified the need for something like that.
How many, I guess, bill ideas for educational policies have you gotten from either your own experience being in school and not being the best student, or, you know, from your daughters kind of just experiencing as a parent, like, hey, like we should change this or do something different?
I don't know how many ideas, but it just kind of shaped the importance of them. I don't know if there's one thing that I've introduced. You know, my big focus is on the budget work is pretty simple. I try to do 3 things the last few years. You know, expand access for early education, including childcare programs, increase funding for our schools, and then increase college access, more slots for California. So I try to keep it simple on those 3 things. There's a bunch of tweaks along the way, little pieces. And we've been very successful. I've been so lucky. When I took office in 2014 and was appointed to chair that budget committee overseeing education funding, this is my 8th year doing it. And I will say that's like I'm able to not be a master, but really understand the topic after all these years without the term limits having to jump around. So having a lot of knowledge on the topic, and just with the soaring economy. You know, more than doubled our funding for public schools, for TK through 12 schools. You know, we've doubled funding from I think about $5 billion to $10 billion for ECE programs, including, you know, universal pre-K now, and dramatically expanded access for UC and CSU and financial aid. So those have been my kind of 3 major bucket priorities, and I'll continue to push on those.
Push on that. So you kind of mentioned you came in 2014, right? And there was like a big class right before you in 2012. And so like a lot of those members either have 2 more years or a lot of them have left, right? You're going to have 20 some new assembly members. What's it like kind of, you know, having all these new faces to meet? And, you know, I guess, you know, you're kind of like the senior on campus, you've been around, you know, and you're going to have all these new faces. How's it going to be operating and kind of being kind of one of the senior statesmen in the assembly?
Well, I think we have about 15 to 20 new Democrats coming in the assembly, depending on how these elections play out. So we'll have, you know, 45-ish returning Democrats. So it's not like we're getting a whole new crew. And this is what it was like 10 years ago, before term limits, when we had, you know, every 2 years you have this massive change. So we are going to have way more this year and the next year than we saw between, you know, 2012 and 2022. You you know, we'll figure it out. There's always change that happens in a legislative body. People, individual members change. Eventually leadership changes,
Right.
and all these bodies. So it's just par for the course.
That's interesting. So like in May, there was kind of like a question of leadership in the assembly, and it looked like Robert Rivas was going to try to make a challenge to the speaker, Rendon, who'd been there for a long time, and you guys had a big caucus all day, and they came out with this joint statement. And the reporters afterwards, they had a quote from you, I think, when they asked, like, what happened in there? Like, what was going on? And you said, you gave your thoughts on kind of what was happening and what's going to happen coming up here in December. Kind of what has changed since May, or if anything, and kind of what's your outlook on kind of the leadership battle coming in here into session here in December?
Well, I think it's settled down. Time has passed.
Mm-hmm.
And Anthony Rendon is our speaker. I support him,
Mm-hmm.
and he will be the speaker after these next elections. I'm pretty confident about that. And then it'll be normal, actually, because in the speakers or the pro tem's final couple years in office is when there's always jockeying to be who's next. The awkwardness was this past spring. It wasn't a friendly transition. It was an attempt of a coup.
Right.
And to say anything different is just fantasy. It was an attempt to, like, a couple years prematurely oust the leader and get a new one. And I think the majority of our assembly said, hey, let's just wait until the speaker actually is in the final term of office. And then that's what happened when I was a freshman, when the speaker that time, Tony Atkins, was in her final term.
Right.
There was jockeying from a half a dozen people to look to succeed. And that's the way it always is in the Senate as well. So I think after these elections, when Anthony Rendon is reelected as speaker, then you'll see kind of the normal process for a transition.
Okay, so you think it's going to be kind of like it has been, as you said, for a long time, right?
Yeah, if you go back to after the last 20 years, and keep in mind, I told you when I first started here, that was during the Willie Brown era. So I've seen all these changes, and it's almost 95% of the time, or no, every time for the assembly, it's been in the speaker's final term, and usually the individual takes the position in between like February and April of the final year.
Right.
And so there's usually the vote the months before that. With Rendon over Tony Atkins, it was a few months earlier was the actual vote, but the transition didn't happen until the spring of the final year.
Right. That was even a crazier one, right? Because allegedly Raul Bocanegra had it sealed up, and then he lost his his primary, right? And then, as you said, it kind of created this horse race of, half a dozen to a dozen individuals who thought they had what it took to be speaker. Do you expect to see something similar, I guess, in the next 2 years? Where
I'm confident that it's going to be calm and normal kind of conversation. How many people actually are the candidates? I don't know. I don't know. I know Robert Rivas has quite a few people who want him to be the next, but there's 40 something of us, and so there's a lot of new members who are going to have opinions as well. So there's 45 of us coming back, and there's 15 to 20 new Democrats, and so we'll have 60-ish, between 60 and 65 Democrats, and all those new people have opinions as well. So there'll be a whole conversation about that, and it'll be, like I say, a normal type of a jockeying for who succeeds our leader, like we've always had for the past couple decades.
We, I guess, had an interesting announcement at Gavin Newsom last week of a special session coming up on December 5th, right as you guys are sworn in, dealing with kind of oil and kind of what windfall profits.
Yeah.
Kind of what are your thoughts on this special session and kind of the timing of it?
Well, I respect the governor, and he has the opportunity to call a special session, and we'll take that very seriously. And the topic, I 100% agree with what the governor is talking about. There's, high gas prices, and we see sometimes the price of crude oil going down on the international market.
Right.
And we don't see the prices, a correlation here in California and some other places across the nation. We see them drop more. And so it leads to the question, is there price gouging? Is there spiking? Is there, massive windfall profits from the oil companies? And people in California are hurting, with
Right.
inflation and gas prices. It's a real topic. And so it's a worthy thing to discuss. And yeah, we will call the special session the first day we come back, when we, swear in our new members and vote for our new speaker that day as well. So
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So
it'll be an exciting day.
does the special
December.
session start where some of the old members still? And then
No, it'll be, I think, what is it, December, I forget the date. It's the
5th,
Monday,
I think.
the 5th. Yeah.
Okay.
So that day we'll swear in the new members and we'll introduce that special session. There won't be hearings that day. There won't be votes on the thing, on the proposal. And then we will have a process like committee hearings. And usually in December, unless there's an emergency, there's not usually hearings anyway. So we'll probably start a process to establish the committees to listen and dig into the governor's proposal that day. And so over the next few weeks and months, we will look into that and evaluate, what the options are for us. And this is not a new topic, it's not this proposal, but there's proposals on, for example, like oil severance taxes here in California. And these other issues have come up before. And so I anticipate there'll be a whole slew of ideas that people put forth. And granted, it's not just the governor's proposals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other members can have ideas on the gas prices and the oil industry that they can put in the hopper. Like remember a couple of years ago, we had the special session on tobacco. There's several bills that were put into that special session that were heard. So I would think that there'd be potentially more ideas, put forward in addition to what the governor is talking about with his proposal.
What is the benefit of a special session versus just kind of waiting for the?
It allows it to happen sooner.
Mm-hmm.
It has an urgency opportunity. The bill can become law on an expedited manner. You can kind of, put the work in the front end. And so, so a topic like this where, has a big impact on the people of California today, I think is worthy of that discussion. But I think we're open to it. We haven't seen a proposal yet, but you think it's an important topic. And, we'll evaluate it once we come back on the first Monday in December.
Yeah, interesting. I was in LA last Sunday, and all of a sudden just kind of Twitter just starts blowing up with kind of this kind of scandal and the LA City Council, and all of a sudden people are putting statements out, and just very interesting kind of seeing the kind of the aftermath that's following in. You have dealt with city councils. You have been very involved in kind of the Black Caucus and kind of the race relations here in the state and things going on. Kind of what are your thoughts on kind of what's going on in LA City Council, and is that something that's been going on a long time, and what can we do to kind of make sure stuff like this doesn't happen in the future?
Well, it was a shock to all of us when we saw those conversations and heard the words discussed from political leaders. And, it was harmful and hurtful and raw. I'm biracial. I come from an African-American family, and, those words are just inexcusable. And it's just like, stuck it to people who heard them, but also for many of us in politics is we knew the people who said those words. It's not like something from somebody far away, or sometimes in politics, it's somebody from your different persuasion that says that. Oh, it's like somebody different party or different type of, these are like our, core of Democrats that or people have the same values as us that said these things. And so it was very, very hurtful and harmful. And it's interesting, the conversation in LA, I'm just seeing it from afar.
Right.
It seems that there's clearly right and wrong, and this is wrong. But I think that there's, a generational push down there too in Los Angeles, which is really interesting to me, that some of the, younger people in Los Angeles are really, the changing electorate of California. First of all, no one, even people who aren't young, say this is absolutely abhorrent. What those words came out as elected officials said, they should resign, all of that too. But it's interesting, like as you take a step back and look at the different layers of it, just the, the activism of a city of LA of 4 million people, and how it's just galvanized the whole community, and especially younger people, I think is really interesting to me, and how that bolds for the future. multicultural bridge building. Because the irony of LA, and like Tom Bradley, the famous mayor, he was able to become a mayor because he was a bridge builder with Blacks and Latinos and Asians and people from, the West Side and so forth. So he was able to bridge that and able to solve the problems of California. You need, many times we say, that a black-brown coalition, these big issues of poverty, race, and just the issues that we face throughout California. And I'm optimistic of seeing the next generation saying, no, we need all of us together. We can't have this division.
Yeah. Well said. As we're talking, we've all just gotten our ballots in the mail. And especially locally, there's a lot of stuff a lot of people are trying to vote on and they just don't know, who's running for this school board or, should I vote for this local ballot measure, things like that. Kind of what are some things that kind of front of mind on your end that you think is important that we take a look at and consider voting for?
The local ballot measure? Well, there's so much confusion in all these ballot measures and all these commercials on the propositions and certainly the gaming ones. And, you know a lot about that too. I think voters usually get it right, trust their instincts. They figure things out. And so a few voters have asked me and I said, I give them information, but I said, I trust you. You'll make the right choice. I don't tell them, there's one here locally that on homelessness is Measure O, which is controversial. I'm 100% in support of it because I think what it'll do is it'll force the cities. It basically says two things. One, that people can't be camping on some of these areas in public right away. But also it says the city must open up facilities for a certain percentage of homeless.
Right.
And so what I think that'll do, that'll force the city to open up these locations because too often you get communities that say, oh, I don't want it there. I don't want it there.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting. It's like, oh, you don't want people to sleep on your park in here, and you're mad, but you don't want to open this facility to get them out of the park.
Right.
So you can't have it both ways. So I think that this measure will really make the city step up and open sites throughout the area to get homeless off the streets.
Right.
And we put in the state budget the last couple of years north of $12 billion for cities to do this.
Wow.
And it's time to see results.
So that would kind of work hand in hand with the 25 million you've already got for kind of some of the sites.
It will. Yeah. It will. And some of the cities would say, we need ongoing, not one time. And we hear that. And we have, ongoing for the last 4 years, put money in there, and we will continue to do so. But, we can't keep dragging our feet on this. We need to act. People in our communities are frustrated. They see it. I'm frustrated. We see it with our own two eyes. And it's, an albatross around our neck.
No.
Elected officials, all of us, local, city, county, state, federal. This is our issue.
No, well put. Well, I know you're busy and you got to go. You got a lot of voters to still talk to before November. So thanks for joining us and taking the time. It was a pleasure talking with you, and look forward to doing this again sometime.
Thank you. I always appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.